The Shadow in the Attic. In a quiet village nestled between rolling hills and dark forests, there was an old house that no one dared to enter. It stood alone at the end of an overgrown path, its windows dark and its roof sagging with age. For years, stories were whispered about the house, but no one knew for certain what haunted it. Until the night, a young boy named Thomas had no choice but to sleep there. Thomas had lost his way after wandering too far from his home. The forest grew darker, and the wind howled through the trees. Then, through the tangled branches, he saw the silhouette of the house. Relieved, Thomas ran up the path and knocked on the creaking door. When no one answered, he pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was cold, thick with a scent of dust and decay. A strange silence hung in the halls, as though the house were holding its breath. "Hello?" Thomas called out, his voice echoing softly. There was no answer. But there was something else. A faint shuffling sound, almost too quiet to hear, coming from the ceiling above. Shivering, Thomas explored the rooms until he found an old bed in what must have been a bedroom long ago. The mattress was lumpy and smelled strange, but he was too tired to care. He curled up under a moth-eaten blanket and shut his eyes. It wasn't long before he woke up to a soft creak. The room was pitch black, but Thomas could feel it. Something was watching him. He turned his head ever so slightly toward the ceiling and froze. From a small hatch in the attic above, a thin line of light spilled into the room. A shadow moved across it. His heart pounded. Maybe it's just a tree branch, he thought, trying to calm himself. Then he heard it. A whisper, low and raspy. "Thomas." His breath caught in his throat. How did it know his name? He stayed perfectly still, his eyes locked on the hatch. "Thomas, come play." The whisper was closer now, as though whoever, or whatever, was up there had its face pressed against the attic door. The thin beam of light widened as the hatch began to creak open. A long, thin hand, pale and clawed, reached down from the darkness above, curling its fingers against the edge. Thomas bolted out of the bed and ran for the door, but it slammed shut before he could reach it. Behind him, the whisper turned to laughter, soft, cruel laughter that made his skin crawl. He looked back just in time to see the hatch swing fully open. From the attic emerged a figure, too tall and too thin, its limbs moving in unnatural jerks. Its face was wrong. No eyes, just hollow indentations, and a mouth that stretched far too wide. "Come play, Thomas," it crooned again, its voice coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Thomas screamed and yanked at the door, but the thing was already crawling toward him, its long fingers tapping against the wooden floor. Just as he thought it would grab him, the door burst open, and Thomas tumbled into the cold night air. He ran and didn't stop until he saw the lights of his village. The townsfolk found him hours later, shaking and pale, babbling about the shadow in the attic. When they returned to the house the next day, they found it empty. The hatch to the attic was gone, as though it had never been there at all. But some nights, when the wind blows just right, villagers say you can hear whispers coming from that lonely house. And if you're not careful, the shadow might call your name next.